Welcome back to our last lecture here and to the last media query that we need to implement in order to now finally make our website also respond to smaller phones. Now, many times for mobile, I like to use a media query at about 600 pixels. However, we just did a media query at about 700 pixels, I think. And by the way, there is something really nice here in this device view that I didn't show you yet, which is that you can click here on this menu and then here show media queries. And so then it adds that view here at the top, which will show us exactly what media queries we have. So this is the ones that we added, and we can then click on them and it will then move our screen there. So exactly to that position of that media query. So 75M is 1200, then the next one was 944, and then the one that we implemented in the last lecture was this one here. So at 704 pixels, and so that's, I don't think there is a need to implement the next one at 600. So that's just 100 pixels less, and so at this point the design still looks quite nice. Right? So visually everything is okay, so no need to add another one. So let's maybe jump another 100 pixels to 500. Okay. And once again, I'm doing all this here basically so that you can follow my methodology and so that you can learn basically the entire thought process that goes into choosing these breakpoints. Because that is something really, really important once you will implement your own designs. But anyway, let's now inspect this here at 500 pixels. And here there is some problem. So these logos are way too big. So this last one is already even moving out of the page. Then here, this image is starting to get really small. And here the content is really big. So the visual balance here in this section is not really nice anymore. And the same here and here. Then here, once again, the card is getting really small. And while here, it still looks okay. Here, maybe the gallery could be a little bit bigger at this point. And also here, this looks a little bit bad right now. So even our button here already wrapped in 3 lines, and here also in 2 lines, which makes this icon here really small. So that's not good at all. And also here. So here there is not really space for having these 2 columns anymore. And so that's yet another thing that we need to fix. Right. So basically what this means is that at 500 pixels, the design is already too bad. Because if we set a breakpoint at 500, for example, then at 506, let's say, the design would still be like this. So it would still look similar and it would still be bad, right? So let's try to find something in between here, like 550 pixels. So while it is still not ideal, I think it's a bit more acceptable. So here it is still the text on one line. Here the images are quite a lot bigger than before. And here at least the logos still fit on the page. So let's set our breakpoint at 550 approximately. And of course, actually outside of this. So add media max width. And let's do 550 divided by 16. And here I'm going to round it actually to just 34. So that will then be 544 pixels. All right. So 34M. And then quickly getting this comment here. So below 544 pixels, which is for phones. Okay. So from now on, what we will do is to have all the grids in just one column. So there will no longer be multiple columns because now we don't have enough space for that anymore. So here, what we did in the previous media query was to take the 2 columns and 4 columns and transform them into 2. And so again, now it's time to change that into just 1 column. And the same, of course, for the grid that has 2 columns. All right, so that will already make a big difference. And since we're working on the grid, let's also dramatically decrease the gap, so the vertically gap in this case, because that's going to be the only gap that's left now. So this is actually grid, row gap, and let's say 4.8 rem. And so let's go check it out. So you see that here we already have the new media query, so we can click there. And here, of course, for now, things are similar. And well, this doesn't seem to really have changed. Let me reload. Oh, and actually, I think I didn't even change. Yeah, so of course, this should be 1FR. Let's actually just write 1FR then. And yeah, there we go. All right, now the images are huge here, and they're also not in the right order anymore. Because basically what we want is the image to be first, just like here. So first the image, then the text. But since previously we had that Z pattern, this is the order of the elements now in the HTML. So we will need to fix that. But first, let's take a look at all of this. And indeed, it looks now very big, but it will be enough to just reduce this a tiny bit, and immediately it will start looking okay again. All right, so there's a ton of space here now. And so there's a ton of space here now everywhere. But again, let's say we are at like something like 420. And so then suddenly it does look okay, right? Except for this one here, because this grid is not one of those that we just changed. So here we will need to do that manually. But for now, what matters is, yeah, that this is now better. So the images also make a lot more sense now here. But yeah, let's now change things one by one. And I'm going to start with removing a lot of the spacing here in the hero. So let's say that we make this even smaller. For example, something like the iPhone X will look like this. And so then we have way too much space here on the sides, right? So that space is because way back we added that. I think it was here in this media query. Oh, and I cannot click it because if I want to click it, I need to change back here to responsive. So yeah, we added that huge space back here, but now down here it is too much. And so we need to override that again. So let's maybe work at this width here, which is kind of representative of many phones. So many phones are usually around this. So between like 350 and 450. Okay, so again, removing now a lot of the spacing that we have here. So let's actually see what we did back then. So we had the hero. So let's just grab that and then override what we want to change in this situation. So this here, of course, will stay the same. We can also leave the gap, I think. But the padding, let's put it actually back to 3.2, which is what we had before. Okay. Now I'm not sure if that actually changed. But here it is actually quite visible that it did change. So here the space is now way less than it was before. And here it becomes even more visible once we reach this point here. Now there's also way too much vertical space, like here and here. So let's remove that as well. but that I think we didn't touch before. So let's come back here to the top where that section actually is. So here we are. So section hero. Of course, the background color should stay the same. And now I will just basically change both to half. So 2.4 there and 4.8. Maybe that's a little bit too little. So the next one is 6.4. Okay. So that's better as well. The same thing here. So again, judging now on a real phone, that looks quite decent. So now with this, all the content fits here vertically. There is just some problem here with the button. And so let me also fix that as well. So the button right now has a little bit too much space maybe here on the sides. And also, I think it's probably not high enough. So on mobile phones, we really need to make sure that buttons are big enough so that we can actually tap them easily on phones. So let's change that. Right here in the general is where we have our buttons. So let's grab this code here. And so let's actually increase the vertical padding to 2.4, let's say. And then vertically, we need a lot less. So let's say half. So just like this. And now they do, again, fit side by side. And they are also bigger, and which will make them easier to tap. All right. Now just the image here maybe is a bit too small now. So let's increase the width right there. So I think we had changed this already before, but here we need to override that again. And here, of course, hero image. So that will fix that. Yep, that's a bit nicer. And now let's talk about these logos. So of course, they're way too big. So now this one and this one do no longer fit. So let's decrease that. And again, this we already did before, but now we need to make them even smaller at a height of 1.2 rem. So really small. And now they fit just nice, even if the phone would be only like 300 pixels wide. All right. But let's again stay at something like 400. And yeah, let's move on here. And so now we need to switch basically this row with this row right here. Because of course, remember that each of these is basically its own row, right? So we can see that nicely if we turn on the grid, then here we go. So basically what I'm going to do now is to manually select this element here, so this row, and then make it the first row. Then these two here are still correct. And then also I will change this one here with this one. Okay. So back in our HTML, I could now add a new class to these elements that I want to select now. So in particular, this step image box, but instead I will simply use the nth child pseudo class. Okay. So again, this here is one of the rows of this grid, right? And so I will now select this one. And I can then say nth child number 2. And now here it is number 2 and not number 1, because this is actually exactly the second child of this element right here. So this number here does refer to the number of the children of the element and not of the number of the children that has this class here. All right. So indeed, this one here is the first that has this class, right? but it is in fact the second child of the container, so of this element right here. And so therefore we need to write the number 2 here, even though for the selector we still need this. Okay, so that's a bit confusing, I know, but that is just how it works. So you just need to keep in mind that this number here is the actual basically order of the child in the container. So it has nothing to do with the class name. Okay, but anyway, here what I want to do is to make this the first row. So basically move this here into the first row. And so that does indeed fix it. Right? And now I just need to select this last one and move it up also 1. So that is the 6th child. And so right now it is in grid row number 6. And if I want to move that up 1, I can just write 5. All right. And there it is. So that was switched, and all the other elements, they are of course simply laid out automatically according to their source order. All right. Now the thing here is that the spacing is now a bit ambiguous. So basically the spacing between the image and the number 2 here is the same as the spacing between the image and the previous step. And so that doesn't make a lot of sense. So instead, of course, this image should be closer to this number where it belongs to. And the same for this one, and the same for this one. So it's sitting here at the middle, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, we can't change the gap selectively in just some places, right? So the gap property applies everywhere, but we can do a small trick. So we can select all of these boxes here. So basically all of these image boxes. So, well, like this one here, and then move it down just a little bit. So using transform with translate. So step, image, box. And now, of course, we want to select all of them. And so transform and then translate. And again, translate is simply the easiest way of moving elements around without affecting the rest of the elements around it. So we want to translate it vertically, and so that's the Y direction. And let's do 24 pixels. Okay, and indeed, that is a lot better. So it's now closer here to the number. And yeah, that looks just perfect. We could even align all of the thing here to the left maybe, but I think that then it would look strange with the circles. So let's just leave it like this. Okay, so moving down here, everything looks good. But then it's also time to make this one here actually with just 1 column. So this one still has 2 columns because it is not one of these grids here. So we did this one manually, and therefore that's why this didn't get affected. So let's check out what this one is called. And it is this one here. So the testimonials. And then grid template columns 1FR. And that's it. Right? So that was easy. Once again, thanks to the power of CSS Grid. And let's now also change this one here. So the spacing between these is a bit too much now. And also, let's finally make this a 4x3 gallery. So with just 4 columns. So that is this one here. All right. Let's actually just grab these two, changing it to, as I said, 4 columns, because right now it is actually 6. And then the gap, we can take it down one step to 12 pixel. And yeah, that is a lot better. So now it is still beautiful and we can still appreciate the images here. We could maybe even make it with 3 columns again, but yeah, I think it's good like this as well. Now here everything actually looks perfect, I would say. So even here, and even when it is even smaller like this, for example, if we had like an older phone, right? But again, going back to 400, that's still perfect. But of course here we have this problem that we also need to now make this into 2 columns. So that's very easy, right? So not the meals section, yeah, but here, the CTA section. So actually it's just this one here. And so 1 FR right there. Okay, nice. But let's actually make this image here. Oh, well, it disappeared. Why is that? Let's inspect, because that shouldn't be happening. I mean, we do not have a fixed width on this one, on the CTA. Right. And so it should appear. But, well, it doesn't. Yeah, but I think I know why. And the reason is that this div element here does have no content. So this one that has the image has in fact no content at all. And so therefore it also makes sense that CSS doesn't then give it any height. So before, the only reason why it was visible was because it was side by side with this other element here, which of course has a lot of content. And so then automatically the element that was besides it also had the exact same height. But now that is no longer the case. And so if we want this element here to become visible, we need to now give it manually a height, basically. So that's the CTA image box. And let's try 360 pixels maybe, 36 RAM. All right. And that's maybe a little bit too much. Let's decrease this back. Just reload here quickly. And yeah, I think that's a bit too much. And maybe it would be even nicer if we made this here first. So made it appear before all this. So let's tone it 1 down to 32. And then let's say grid row 1. All right. And yeah, that looks very nice. Kind of as an introduction to this section here. There's just too much spacing here now, like in this text box still. So let's also quickly reduce that. So that's this. And let's just set that to 3.2 on all 4 sides. And yeah, there we go. Beautiful. And I think that is actually all that I had to change here. So if we take a look at it again on some actual device, let's say the Pixel 2 now, which has 411 pixels apparently, then I would say that we have a very nice web page on this phone. Right? I mean, it might look everything still a little bit too big here, but if you test this on an actual phone in your hand, then you will see that actually it makes sense to be this big. So I did that actually before, and it looked quite nice on my iPhone. So that had this size right here. And yeah, again, everything is just the right size, I think. But of course, these things are also a little bit subjective. So if you want, you can of course also adjust some more things here. And that would then be another great opportunity for you to practice these skills. All right, so if you feel like it, you can do that, but I will call it a day here and call this project finished at this point. So finished, at least in terms of HTML and CSS and of responsive web design, because there is still some things that we will want to do. For example, to actually make this navigation work when we click here, because right now, well, it is not really working, of course. And also I want to make this navigation sticky so that when we scroll, it stays at the top. And also I will want these buttons here to actually work. So when we click them, that we then have some smooth scrolling animations that goes to the corresponding section. So for all of that, we will need just a little bit of JavaScript. And so I will show you how to create this kind of effect in the next section. But for now, you can take a well-deserved break because you did really, really well in making it all the way to the end of this huge, huge project and writing all this code here by hand in order to create such a great project and such a big real-world project here. So huge congratulations for making it this far, and I'm really proud that you're still with me here, and I hope that you're proud yourself as well. So take care, and I see you soon once you're ready for the next section.